You may wonder what my stance and my position is on a certain question, and that is economic collapse. What's it going to be like, and how should we prepare? What's my opinion on it? Now, I've heard somebody I talk to and watch their videos a bit say that there's quite possibly going to be cannibals in metropolitan United States, and they said that some people, the only thing they'll have to deal with is prostitution, and with that last bit there, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, especially those people who, bureaucrats, accountants, and all these sort of high-end pen-pushing jobs that won't really amount to anything when there's not much money around. Those people who can't think 3 weeks in advance and spend like wildfire, very consumeristic, that may be the only option for some of them. Truth never told is the idea that the currency is going to collapse and they should put themselves in a position whereby they will have something to rebuild with. And he's talking silver, physical silver in your hands. And there's other people who, such as Storm Clouds Gathering, who say, think along the lines of, well, you can't eat silver and gold, and, even if you will be able to deal with silver, what happens when your silver runs out? You won't be able to buy any more stuff. And he's lived in the third world, and he knows that people in the third world, the ones who get somewhere have got a means of production, and so he's going to get into that means of production by having about what looks like about 1/6 of an acre of veggie patch with a chain mesh fence around it. Now, he's even to the idea almost like preppers. You've got 6 months worth of food, and then what happens when you run out? We're going to be back to the Stone Age. I'm sort of thinking a bit more like Truth Never Told. There's one thing that people can't really answer. These people who believe it's going to be full-on Stone Ageist and all this, and it's going to be like as though they've been nukes go off or carpet bombed the place, or there's been an EMP event. We're going to be back to the Stone Age, so we've got to start thinking and living like we're in the Stone Age, and be completely self-sufficient, more than I am, because I'm just off grid. But I need my half a gallon of petrol, a week to wash my clothes. I mean, there's other ways and means and that I, have sort of thought about and could possibly do. And, if I hoard up a bit of propane, I'll be able to run the propane generator for quite a while. And that would, take care of not having enough petrol and whatnot. But there's one big hiccup in all this idea that we're just going to get shot back into the Stone Age and we're going to have to live like pioneers and then work our way up from there. I look at where I work, for instance. We've got a bizarre machine called a Vine Master, and it'll prune grapevines. I mean, it just drives them, just pre-prunes them, which is, a rough way to prune. They do produce grapes just with that form of pruning only, machine pruning, although it's a bit neglecting to the plant, but anyway. And they've got a grape harvester that attaches onto the same machine. And, they've got a couple of tractors and a loader backhoe and a few trucks and whatnot. That's good equipment that can produce a lot of food without a problem. Why would you turn your back on that equipment? Oh yeah, but Link, you're missing something. They're not going to be able to get diesel. Hang on a minute. Are you telling me that some bloke who owns a service station or a fuel depot or a gas station who's got thousands of gallons of this stuff and no food is not going to hash out a deal with a farmer? By hell, he'll hash out a deal. See, people's standard of living, they don't want it to drop. They still want to eat and they don't want their standard of living to drop. Thing is, they mightn't really get much of a choice. Quite a bit of their standard of living may drop a fair bit, as anyone who's having financial troubles. But they're still going to want to eat. And people will barter. They will hash out deals amongst themselves. This happens, I look at the days of the Soviet Union collapsing. 93, the ruble had hyperinflation, and you look at different things like that, and people work stuff out amongst themselves. Now, with the Soviet Union, people would usually deal in homemade vodka or in cigarettes or just whatever. One would have one thing and the other would say, what do you got to trade? And they'd hash out a deal. One may feel they're getting a little bit more. At the end of the day, that near enough, good enough. They just wanted a bit of food. They wanted a bit of something for the work they'd done, to just get somewhere, just to keep chugging along. No mind have been trying to make some killer profit, but they wanted something for their efforts. And I talked to one Russian on YouTube. None of them, I read this separately, that none of them, I just tended to notice this too, none of them like to think about it because they see it as the downfall of their country from a superpower to a bankrupt second world country. And it's not nice to think about that because that was basically when the country failed. And he sort of said to me, look, it was 20 years ago, and I sort of, it's all like a dream. It's all like a movie I watched many years ago, But he said, I know I did live it, but it was all a long time ago. And he didn't want to think about it. But he did say that one thing he can remember was a particular family member had a pretty bad tooth and needed a tooth pulled out by the dentist or some sort of dentistry work done. Their teeth were really giving them a lot of trouble. And so the dentist done it, and then he said, so what do you got, sort of thing, you got to pay me with something here. Anyway, they hashed out a deal, basically, and ended up paying him in pots of honey, of all things. And I said to him, I've heard about the cigarettes and how people want to, they dealt with them. And he said, look, mate, people dealt with anything and everything. It was barter, It was just like, I got this and you want it, what do you got? It didn't matter if it's cigarettes, but just whatever. It's broken machinery, anything and everything, firewood, whatever. Sauerkraut, anything. They'd hash out a deal and come to an agreement. And they'd barter it out till they got to something. And you may say, the oil companies will be this, that. No, the oil companies will take something. But I'll tell you a little bit more about where I grew up. Now, for one, I'll tell you this, 1/6 of an acre of veggies is not going to really be competitive next to some of the people around where I grew up. We're talking thousands of acres of wheat. I mean, there's more tons than you can get your head around. Just endless amounts of wheat. It was unbelievable. A lot of it got exported. And when I was about 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, we were up not too far from where I was born, and the farm there done a bit of sheep, but a good heap of wheat as well. They had it all worked out down to a fine art, exactly how much dollars per acre it cost in diesel and bang, 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 and all that. And basically, they done a lot of wheat on a big scale, and it was a 30,000 acre farm. If you're thinking that you've got to start from the beginning and make a go of it and say you're just going back as low as you can, living like a pioneer with 1/6 of an acre, you ain't going to compete with these sort of people. And as you might say, yeah, but you got to get enough diesel to run all that equipment. That's right, but there was somebody who I've read about who wasn't terribly far distance from where I spent most of my childhood, and they grew wheat and canola, which is known for its cholesterol-free oil. I always cook with it over any other form of oil. I don't have it like olive oil. I always cook with canola oil. And, that plant was specially developed to have no cholesterol in the oil. And basically, this bloke went and got rid of his 2 large tractors and bought about 4 or 5 smaller tractors. A particular model that was built with a biodiesel compatible engine. And he'd done the same thing for his ute or light truck. Got rid of the existing one and bought one that was a model that specifically had the biodiesel compatible engine. He no longer has a diesel bill. He doesn't have to cut a deal with anyone at a gas station or fuel depot, anything. He doesn't have to cut a deal with none of them because he doesn't have a diesel bill. He uses the oil from last year's canola crop that he pressed and turned into biodiesel himself. And I've seen it on, and I even think I like the videos too, on Mythbusters and Top Gear, where they basically just get normal cooking oil and shove it straight into a diesel and they drive it. And yeah, it's apparently, may not be perfect for some engines over the long term, but having said that, it's an option, and there are engines built for it, and most engines can take it anyway. They may clap out after 15 years or whatever, but we'll have a currency probably sorted out properly within 6 months, year and a half at worst. And the fact of the matter is that, it may be a currency that's backed by a basket of commodities. Coal, natural gas, iron ore, and wheat. That's quite a possible scenario. Or we could just jump on board and use silver or gold. And let's face it, those little Certi cards, the ones I showed you, the Peppermint 1 gram golds, and even the big Pamp one there, they're in cards designed to almost act as a currency. There's another one that I'm going to buy too. It's like a chocolate bar of 1 gram silver pieces, and you can snap and break them all off, and you can have them in sticks of 10 or whatever, or individual grams, and they're designed to sort of be used as a currency. And, with the Certi cards and stuff like that, there's no doubting that it's the real deal, because they've all got their own individual serial numbers and they're signed off on it. It's a very specific, neat, clean looking thing, and they've a lot of effort to fake. And this is a thing. That's sort of almost a ready currency as it is. But either way, there's a vested interest in trade of any sort, not only just for people to eat, but for people to maintain or eventually improve their standard of living, because they don't want it to drop. You go and ask your wife if, she'd be happy with no electricity for a start. She'd be happy with. What's she going to say? I know for a fact that most girls don't like living out of the city, let alone living off grid. And I've found that out myself. And the fact of the matter is that, hey, there's a lot of men who don't like living with the restricted amounts of electricity and whatnot. And people are going to do what they've got to do to get things done, to get trade happening, to, continue to have a reasonable standard of living. And I know another thing too, improvising. People get stuck right into improvising in places. I've even seen people in North Korea talking about, the government provides us with what they can, and if things don't work, we've got to make them work. And this bloke was running, I don't know, a collective or something like that, a farming, collective, and he basically said straight out, if we don't have fuel to run the machine, we've got to work out a way of doing it, gas, and I assume he meant, biogas or gasified gas or something like that, and, we've got to work out how the machine works and get it to run. And he said, as somebody who's in the army or has come from the army, that's the thing. You've got to work out how you're going to make things happen. And, you know, that was one of the things that you sort of, you know, I'm not a wimp, I'm an army man, so we've got to hit this like a ton of bricks and make sure we nut it out and get things to work. You know, and improvisation and holding together crappy machines. They got trucks there that run on gasifiers. I've seen a photo of one, you know, and I've also seen footage taken from the Chinese mountains across the border of them driving around in some of these old trucks from the 1950s, and the blue smoke was pouring out the back. But hey, the truck was still running. They made it happen. You know, it was these things that are just about buggered, but they keep them going, you know. And in Russia, it's a lot the same way. You've got a lot of people that were trained as engineers. They've got a whole heap of old stuff that they couldn't sell or nobody wanted or whatever, you know, and they nut out what they've got to do to keep the whole thing stuck together and keep rolling, you know. And, yeah, improvisation is one of these things. Now, where I grew up as a kid, my father and his boss, look, all they needed was an old arc welder, a whole bunch of arc welding rods, and an angle grinder, and they could make just about anything from any other one of the worn-out machines. And they had a couple of areas of the property that were just old buggered machines reversed in a big stack, you know, all not stacked on top of each other, but all one beside the other. And if you wanted a bearing or whatever, you'd go and look at that old machine to see if you could rate a bearing off that. Anything to avoid having to drive a massive distance to buy these bits and pieces, you know, and sort of use what you had to make things happen. And this is one thing that people are going to have to learn, and those people are good at improvising and tangible when things are selling for cents in the dollar, because that's what will happen. There's one thing I read once, that the physical wealth and the equipment doesn't disappear, but it's all a question of whose hands it's in now. And if you've got enough silver or enough tangible stuff, as people had in the collapse of the Soviet Union, they bought planes, cargo planes, for 5 cents on the dollar, and just ridiculously low price stuff. They bought it for a song. You know, and there was a lot of stuff in the Soviet Union that got sold for some. People buy 8, 12, 20, 25 planes, cargo planes, and then start their own air freight business. And of course, these were planes. They didn't even need to run the business in Russia. They could have run it somewhere else in Europe, somewhere in Asia, whatever. You know, and they went ahead and had done that. But they were in the right place at the right time with tangible money, or, you know, a tangible way of paying. And they got these things for peanuts at the appropriate auctions, and they set themselves up for life, and they're now the wealthy ones. You know, and that's, you know, the position I hope to be in. Because, you know, keep in mind that people aren't going to stop using this equipment and just let it lay idle and then go back to living like pioneers. It's not going to happen, because they'd be stupid not to use that equipment. They also don't want their standard of living to drop, and especially their wife doesn't, and they also got a need to eat. Trade will go on. It will be barter at first. It may end up being silver or some other currency backed by quite possibly commodities or something. They'll work something out. I reckon initially they'll probably try and have another go at just inflating the currency and bailing out, and just like they did in the GFC. And that may cause things to just stall and falter, or people may just not have a bar of it, you know, because there's enough people that are waking up about gold and silver and all that stuff, such as Utah taking gold and silver as taxes. During the ruble collapse, the Russian government would take copper as taxes. Even the bloke who's the finance minister of Italy come out and said that gold is an intrinsic thing to the backing of central banks, and he said that, you know, not very long ago. And you know, but this is the thing: don't sit there doomsday prepper style, hiding in your bunker or fencing off a great area to have your little survival garden. There'll be chaos for a little while. There'll be a few riots. But it'll also be like the collapse of the Soviet Union. You'll be able to get things for cents on the dollar so long as you've got something that's tangible. And if the US dollar collapses, that ain't going to be tangible. Silver and gold will be. So, yeah, if you're a troll, don't take any of this advice. If you're a nice person, have a think about that sort of stuff, because I'm putting myself in a position that people did in the GFC, that people did in the collapse of the Soviet Union, and there are also people who saw the depression coming and done the same thing. They got themselves in an appropriate position to be able to buy all this stuff up in cents on the dollar, and then they become the upper middle class when before they were just average Joe Schmoes, you know. And so that's what I'm aiming for, because I know that it's not going to turn into the Stone Age. I know that people have got a vested interest to continue trade, and there's so many people that don't want to live like the Stone Age, and won't let that sort of stuff happen. And I don't look at it as an end. I mean, it'll be an end to all these non-productive, you know, yuppies, you know, and, you know, you're sort of ones who are bureaucrats and very good at throwing paperwork around, but don't actually produce anything, and sort of, you know, really speaking, they define themselves by the stuff they own. They seem rather superficial. Those sort of people, they may be on their hands and knees, and I won't feel any pity for them. You know, I might give them a job cutting out some of my weeds. But yeah, I want to be in a position these blokes were, who got themselves air transport companies by buying planes for cents on the dollar, you know, and that's what I'm looking towards. Not an end, but a future. Not a case of we're going to hunker down because everything's going to turn bad and we've got to start living as though we're going to expect everything to be bad, but putting myself in a position to be able to better myself off the back of all these fire sales, repossession sales and bankruptcy sales. Yeah, so that's just a bit of food for thought for you all, and there you go, that's my position on it.